Welcome to Salon Talks. I'm Mary Elizabeth Williams, and you probably recognize this guy. It's Nick DiGiovanni. He is a chef, he is a content creator, he is a former MasterChef finalist, one of the youngest ever. He is a multiple world record holder. You have, how many, 25 million followers across your social media platforms, right? Just hit 10 million subscribers on YouTube. That is a unique club to be in, a pretty small one. And now, on top of everything else, he is a debut author. His first book is with an introduction by his best friend, Gordon Ramsay. It's called Knife Drop, Creative Recipes Anyone Can Cook. Congratulations, Nick.
Thank you.
It's a big accomplishment.
It is. It's exciting.
Let's go back a little bit to the place that got you here, which is MasterChef.
Yes.
You were in school. You were near the end.
I was.
And you took time off to compete on this TV show. A really different swerve for a lot of students near the end of their academic career. What was it about that moment in your life that you said, this is the time, this is the place?
I was finishing up college, as you said, and I always like to talk about the concept of fearlessness. And I think it's true that it often is easier to be fearless the younger you are. And I figured it was a point in my life where I wanted to chase cooking in every possible way. And I just saw MasterChef as an opportunity where it might amount to nothing, or it might amount to a career-changing opportunity that, that I could run with in a way that I just at the time didn't know, of course. So I figured, why not take it?
And you were pursuing a culinary career in a really different way than a lot of other people who want to have a life in food, who want to have a life in cooking do. You were looking at it from a much more academic and business-oriented perspective. You were looking at climate change and sustainability. How did that then inform your cook? Like, you didn't want to go to CIA. You didn't want to go immediately apprentice at a restaurant.
Right.
What was it about having that educational foundation that was so important to you? Because that's a unique thing for somebody who wants to cook to do.
It's true. I took a unique approach to food in that sense, where I came at it with a bit more of a traditional education background and found my path that way, right? Which, again, is very unconventional. For me, it allowed me to explore food in different ways, I think, and I liked exploring it through the lens of, as you said, climate change and the environment, because it ties in very closely. And so for me in college, that was a nice way to still be doing the classic academic route while doing something that I loved. I was studying food, and I was learning a lot from it. And I still carry that whole side of food with me today, where we try to do a lot with teaching people about how it ties to the environment. So I haven't forgotten that educational side of it as things have moved forward.
And yet you said, okay, I'm done. I'm going to defer the MBA.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take the MBA. I want to do this full time. It's clear that being on MasterChef was life-changing for you, which of course brings me to Gordon Ramsay. I heard that you kept a journal while you were doing it because you wanted to write down some of the things that he said.
Yes.
What was your expectation of this person, this titan of cooking, against the person who you meet and then you wind up having this really deep, close relationship with?
It's a great question. He's a fantastic mentor. He is passionate, and when I went into MasterChef, all I knew, of course, was the really intense, the yelling, the screaming, you're a little bit scared. And I remember even just a few days in, I still had I was still a little bit on edge around him, as I think everybody was. But when you meet someone, you can pretty quickly tell who they are, I think, in many ways. And I pretty rapidly realized that he was also just this caring, passionate guy. And when I started to see through some of those layers, I eventually think I felt, that's when I really felt comfortable and realized that this could be someone that not only would I really look up to, but learn a lot from. And I had a newfound respect for who he is as a person.
Now you're in this place where you are a well-known figure as well. You are navigating, having followers, fans, people listening to you, taking your advice, critiquing your recipes. What were some things that he told you early on that stick with you about managing that kind of persona as an authority on food?
The number one and very simple thing that I've taken from him and learned from him on that front is just being good to the people around you. It's such a simple thing. And if you're friendly with people and if you're just be yourself and if you're good to them, it makes everything easier, right? So I think that's the number one most important thing. And that was easy for me to see with Gordon and his team, that he treated everyone just like they were his brother or his sister or his friend or whatever. He treated everyone like a person. He treated everyone like you should treat them. And that's very easy to see, by the way, when you're around him. I also think it's very easy to see if someone is not that way. So that was the biggest takeaway that I had, without a question, was just the fact that he's very good to the people around him. And I genuinely have tried to take that same teaching away. And for me, it's made things a lot easier too.
Nick, when you talk about that, I see the ways that you are also a person who is a relationship person. You like collaborating with lots of other people. You like working. You're a social person. In a lot of ways. You collaborate with other creators all the time on your social media, but you also collaborate with celebrities or public figures who are not necessarily first and foremost known as cooks.
Right.
Whether it's the Jonas Brothers or Tom Brady or somebody from The Office making a Frito pie together. You know, those are people who are not known in the food space. I want to know what you learn from them, what you get out of those kinds of collaborations, why you seek them out, and what working with Tom Brady can teach you about becoming a better cook.
It's a fair point that it's a unique combination at times to be with someone who is a superstar on a football field, but you don't know anything about what they're like in the kitchen. The way I look at it is actually quite simple. It's that every single person out there has a totally different food journey, is what I kind of call it. And you might have grown up with a special dish that you remember your mom cooking for you, or you might have been on a trip somewhere where you tried this food that, you know, most people have never heard of, and you can share that story or that experience with people when you talk about food. And so every single opportunity that I've had like that, I go into it knowing that this person that I'm talking to, I know if we spent some time together and talked about what are your favorite food memories, I would probably learn so many things about it, right? And everyone has a different food journey, and you can learn something from anyone out there about food that you never would have thought.
Let's talk about your food journey. You obviously take a lot of influence from your family, from your grandparents, from your background, I see a lot of Rhode Island in your cooking. I see a lot of New England in the dishes that you make. But you've also, in the past several years, you've been traveling all over the world. There's a lot of other influences coming in. How do you build on that foundation of family cooking to now have all of these other influences from being a traveler, from being a cook, from being a metropolitan person now?
I think about this almost in the way that I've structured my book, where there's some foundational recipes and instruction up front to give you those basics if you want them. If you already have them, then I don't want to force anyone into learning how to make brown butter or caramelized onions. But I learned those foundations from my grandparents and from my family. And so once I learned those things as a kid, I feel like I can now take them and go anywhere in the world, or any dining experience that I have. I remember those foundations and those basic things that I learned way back when, and I carry them with me everywhere.
Nick, when we talk about this book and the journey of the book and the story of the book, I want to ask you about some things that are not in the book.
Okay.
What have you got against soup?
Soup.
What is your beef with soup, Nick?
I knew I was going to get a hard time about that. So, the cookbook does have a section in there, of course, as you're alluding to. The soup section is not there. It says error not found, right? And I don't have anything against soup. I just feel as if soup is a recipe and a concept in general where you may spend so much time on it, right? And then at the end of the day, it's all going to be blended into one little pile of mush, right? And there's no texture, there's no excitement most of the time with soup. Food, you put it's a labor of love, right? You put so much into it, and I like for that to show on the plate. That's one reason. I think there are multiple reasons, right? But that's one big reason for me. It's just I feel as if there is food that is much more exciting than soup, and I couldn't justify putting soup in my first book.
All right. I'm going to ask you about something else that's not in the book. When I saw your list of equipment that you recommend home chefs have, I read that list twice.
Okay.
Then I showed it to somebody else in my family, and I said, am I not seeing scale on this list? You don't have scale.
No scale.
I'm shocked. More
Really?
than soup. I'm shocked. What?
More than soup.
More than soup. I'm shocked that you didn't recommend having a digital scale.
Yeah.
Why do we not need a scale? Because that is the big thing that people say is you've got to have a scale if you want to get serious.
Sure. I consider myself more of a savory cook than a pastry chef, and baking and pastry is where, if I were going to go start way back from the basics and kind of learn a bunch, I would dedicate more time to learning there, and moving forward, I want to learn more there. If this was a book focused on pastry and baking and that kind of thing, it would without a question have a digital scale. That'd be the first thing on the list. But with cooking, I'm all about, again, tying back to that word fearless. I'm all about fearlessness. I'm all about going into the kitchen and not really wanting to rely too heavily on a reference. I don't like to cook with amounts. I know I have to put amounts here because it's a cookbook, but it is my hope that with this book and in general, people will be able to go into the kitchen confident enough to cook without numbers, cook without stopping everything and measuring things out. And so that was the simple reason that I didn't have a scale. I want people to cook for fun and without having to think too much.
And just to riff a little, when you talk in the introduction about fearlessness, you and Ratatouille coming from that place of, the most important thing you can bring to the kitchen is fearlessness. And yet, a lot of us have fear, especially because food is so expensive.
Yeah.
Ingredients are so expensive. It feels like the stakes are really high. It's our time, it's our money, and if something goes wrong, it's cost us both of those things.
Very true.
How do we get over that sense of, oh my God, the stakes are so high right now, and get into the kitchen and feel comfortable for people who maybe have lost touch with that or have never tried?
It's scary sometimes. They're mind-boggling prices when you walk into the grocery store now. I don't think I haven't had lamb chops for months and months and months. I can't remember the last time I had them, because when you go into the grocery store, I just can't justify paying some of those prices anymore. I agree. I did a hour-long sort of masterclass video on YouTube not that long ago that I love. It's one of my favorite videos that we've ever made. And in there, pretty early on, I'm teaching sort of, again, fundamentals, basics. I'm showing people how to get a nice golden brown crust on something. And very simply, we took potatoes, and you can buy a bag of potatoes for very cheap. And we took little rings of them, sort of potato fondant type. And I just say, use a potato, use whatever you want, but in this case, I said potato is a great way, because you're not going to worry about wasting. You can still eat them, but you're not going to worry about going through, if you burn one, right? You're not going to worry about wasting a tiny bit of potato here and there. It's a much better thing to learn on than really anything else. And it's all about practice, cooking, just like anything in life. It's all about experimentation and practice and just doing it, right? So if you can find simple, basic things like that to practice on, then suddenly when you have a nice ribeye or lamb chops, you won't be so scared to go and give it a shot.
When you come into your inheritance and you can buy the lamb chops, right? And I love in the book that you have QR codes for techniques so that you can learn the process. It's not just a book, it's a tutorial in many ways. I want to ask you one more thing. There are so many great recipes in it. Was there a recipe that you struggled with the most? Was there something that was your hardest one to achieve?
Sort of created in
but you knew that you wanted this to be in the book regardless. That was like, I've got to get this one right because I want this in the book.
Yes. I mean, the front cover says creative recipes anyone can cook, and I really wanted to stick to that. So that meant for certain recipes, such as the pork belly cow soy, right? It's this dish that I have at a Thai restaurant up the road from my place. And I love it so much that I had to make my own version. But there are multiple components. You've got to get that pork belly nice and crispy, and it's got to be perfect. And you've got to make that incredible broth that's just this, not super complicated, not overly complicated, but it's got to be robust, and it's the star of the dish. You have to make sure that's flavorful and that you nail that. So there's multiple steps and components to it, to the point that it was hard to put it into words in such a way that I could justify it being a recipe that anyone can cook, right? So that was the challenge here and there. The more complicated recipes became difficult to get perfectly worded.
All right, I'm going to sneak one more in for you. Then what would be, for someone who is approaching this book and does feel a sense of intimidation about cooking and wants it to be approachable, what's a recipe that you would say, here's where you should start, here's the page you should open up to, here's the thing that you can start cooking with right away, tonight?
Yeah. I'm comfortable with anyone out there going into the fundamentals section and nailing one of those. Caramelized onions, for instance. I mentioned it earlier. It sounds so basic and so simple, but if you've never tasted deeply rich caramelized onions, you have to. And it's a great way to practice cooking. And suddenly it tastes like candy once you've put in that love and that time to make it and really cook the onions down. So something like that is so simple, but you can then turn around and use it for so many amazing things. You can make caramelized onion dip. You can make a patty melt with it. You can make whatever you want. French onion soup. I'm sorry, soup section, but French onion soup.
Find it somewhere else. Find it somewhere else.
So I would really say, if you can open up that fundamental section and pick something that excites you, brown butter is what I would pick personally. It's my favorite thing. Give me a glass of brown butter and I'll drink a cup of it.
And then spoon that stuff from the bottom.
Right. Get all the nice, beautiful golden milk solids and all the flavor. Any of those fundamentals, anyone can do it.
Nick, I'm really excited to make the gnocchi with the gnocchi with the brown butter.
Favorite recipe in the book.
Oh my God, I can't wait to make it. Nick DiGiovanni, thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Knife drop. It's dropped. It's dropped.
It is dropped. Knife drop has been dropped. Thank you.